Hello and welcome to another edition of Cultural Conversations with the Big South. I'm your host, Darius Thigpen. This month we have a softball superstar joining us. She was preseason player of the Big South, and she makes hitting look easy as she finished atop the conference in average, hits, doubles, total bases. Senior leadoff hitter Sydney Fisher. Sydney, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited about this.
Now we're excited to have you, Sydney. You're quite an impressive student athlete, where your on-field accomplishments might come in second to what you're doing on the field, off the field, on the field. You've got a lot going on both ways, but let's focus on softball for a second.
Okay.
So you burst on the scene in the conference at Radford after transferring from Georgia Southern a few seasons ago. You finished ninth in the nation in hits as a sophomore. This season, you were named first team all conference after hitting just a shade below 400. You were also senior class award top 10 finalist. And oh, by the way, your 4.0 as a double major in biology and chemistry earned you Big South Scholar Athlete of the Year. So, Sydney, on the field, off the field, what are you looking at as like your proudest accomplishment from your college days so far?
So far, I think it would be like a combination because I really think that like winning the award is great, but the way that my teammates reacted to it is like even better to me. They were like so excited, and here I am like shy over here, like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I got this, whatever. But being at the Big South tournament and getting the big scholar athlete trophy and being out there with like smiling, and my teammates were so happy, and I could hear the crowd excited and my parents, and I could hear my teammates really excited. And I think that was the most special moment, just sitting up there. I know I was smiling like ear to ear in that moment, just so excited about it.
And then, of course, speaking of things to be proud of, your all tournament team. And it was quite the accomplishment for you all just to make the tournament in the Big South tournament this year. Last season, it was canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This year, just the top four making it into the Big South tournament. You guys battled it out with Campbell, falling just short in that opening game. And then in the elimination game, you come up huge with a four-hit game. You had a solo home run to start out the game, the leadoff homer. Did you know off contact that you had a home run your second of the year?
I definitely was like, okay, this is a good hit ball. This is well struck. Okay. And then I got like almost a second and I saw it go over and I was like, yes. And I usually just like am really surprised, but this time I like jumped in the air because I was like, this is the way that we needed to start this game. And I had struggled a little bit with Sydney Backstrom earlier in the season. So seeing her and hitting like the first at bat, hitting a home run, I was like, okay, not struggling today.
Wait, so you were already to second base by the time you saw that it was out?
Yeah.
So you're busting out the box. That wasn't a home run trot from you.
No, definitely was not a home run trot. I ended up hitting like a pretty deep fly ball later in the day, and I did start trotting, and then it didn't go out, and I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll stop here at second.
You grew up playing softball, but you had a big influence in your softball life. You have an athletic family, a cousin, Michelle Moultrie, who played softball at the University of Florida when you would have been about 9 or 10 years old. How much of an influence did she have on you wanting to play softball?
Yeah, she had a huge influence because at first I was really close with like the rest of her family. She has a lot of sisters, and so we played puzzles together and just like hung out. And she was kind of always off doing sports anyway. But then one time I was like flipping through the channel, just watching NCAA softball, and we stopped on Florida's game, and I was like, wait a second, like, mom, that's Michelle. Like, she's really out there. She's out there playing. Like, are you serious? And from then on, I was like, wow, this is extremely achievable. Like my own cousin who I've watched in high school and I've watched now in college, I'm like, she's out there doing it. And now she's, even farther up, she's doing pro and about to go to the Olympics this summer. I'm like, this is like something that is very achievable for us. And for me, that was the first time I'd ever really seen anybody that was of color playing and starting and doing as well as she was, and carrying the name and just having the records that she did. And she was a walk on, so she did all this stuff from just being a walk on and having no idea what she was going to do before she went to college, and then just having like a standout career. And so from then on, we started to train every once in a while in the summers. I would go down there for a week or two, and just even her just showing me around, Florida. And I remember a few times after games, they had food delivered, and I just thought that was the coolest thing. I was like, oh my gosh, you have Outback? That is so cool. And I get there early to watch her warm up, and it was just such a dream at that point. And I knew from then on I had to get to college softball, that this is what I wanted to do. And I was like, any effort that I have to make, I want to be there. I want to do that I love watching her play, and like just being in that kind of arena and that kind of stadium, that was just amazing to me.
So you have Michelle there playing SEC softball. I mean, really the highest level of softball when you look around the country. And then for you, did you have other athletic influences growing up, or what was your home life like? Like, were you was the household really athletic, or were you guys into other things?
We weren't really athletic. My parents are kind of athletic, but not really. But don't tell them I said that. My brothers, they did more like recreational stuff, so they did soccer and hockey, which were things that I wasn't really that much interested in. But I started softball at a young age. I wasn't very good, but I was told just to stay the course. My parents knew that I had that dream, I had that aspiration, and they knew that I could be good if I continued, and I really put a lot of effort into it. So they just kept putting me in the positions that I can be like able to excel, and just giving me all the resources that I needed, and just really just being there for me was more than enough. And they were there at every game. And even in college, they were like, we're not going to miss many games, like, with COVID and them not being able to come. Of course, they had to, but for the most part, they've just always been there, just being supportive. And once my brothers left to go to college, it was like focus was on me and softball. And it was like, this is our thing. And even now they're like, I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to have to pick up another team or something. We're not sure what we're going to do on our weekend. But I think that just them pointing me towards that direction and wanting me to just to stay the course like the entire time, even when I switched from left-handed or right-handed to left-handed, and just had a lot of like changes and moving. They were just finding the team that was best for me, and just trying to like set me up to be in the best position to achieve my dreams.
Now, you also ran track in high school, but it sounds like you were pretty locked in on softball even at that point. Now, one difference we do have between track and softball is in track, you do have quite a bit of black representation in that sport. You don't see it as much in baseball. You don't see it as much in softball, where there's not the same level of black representation. So, did you have moments where you really noticed, like, oh, I'm the only black player out here, or anything to that effect in softball?
I think I was always closest with the other black person on the team. And I felt like up until I got to college, I only ever had two black people max on a team. So it was like me and one other person, me and that other person. And so, people often looked at us as the example for the black community. And I felt like we were always had the pressure to just be right. Like we have to perform well, and then we have to, erase some of these stigmas that people have. Like, I'm like, well, she's late, but I'm not late. And like, I want you to know that, like, we can show up on time, and we can work hard, and our parents are going to behave in the crowd, and like we're going to do what we're supposed to do, because that's all we have. And I think like for a lot of my growing up, it was always like proving to other people that, hey, like I'm good, I'm a good one, and the people associate it with me with being like, oh well, these are the black people, but this is like Sydney, and she's different, and we like her. And so trying to blur those lines was always kind of tough, because they always saw me as somebody different than like my entire community, which is not really how it works. And so a lot, even just over the summer, this past summer, with all that was going on socially and politically, people on my own team currently, they were asking me like, how do you feel about that? Like, what's going on? And I'm like, you guys know that that could be me at any moment. And I know you guys don't think of it that way, because you see me in this light and you see them over here, but that could easily be me. And I think having those tough conversations just growing up was always trivial for each team that I had been on, just showing them that, what, yes, I may, play softball, and you don't see a lot of other people playing softball, but like this is me too. Like I am that person as well. I'm part of their community, I'm part of your community, and I'm part of like, where we're at right now. And then just growing up and getting to college and having my majority black team, or just halfway black team, we had so many more than I felt like I had ever experienced. And they were just, teaching me like, hey, this is how we act, and this is what we do. And, this is how our culture, performs. And for me, growing up in like a predominantly like white neighborhood and going to a PWI, I had no idea. I was like almost culture shocked from my own culture. And that was weird. So I was like, wow, I kind of feel like I almost don't fit in with the people that I, look the most like. But they kind of gradually started like initiating me into like, hey, this is like what you missed out on in life kind of thing. And I think that was extremely good for my growing. And I still keep in touch with all those people. I absolutely love them. And they just really helped me to grow into my own kind of person.
And for any student, for any student athlete, for any young person in general, you do represent yourself, you represent your family on the field, off the field, and all of that. But you also, as you mentioned, kind of had to be unwittingly, really, a representation for an entire group of people. Did that weigh on you socially? Was that something that kind of dragged you down, or was it something that you just were willing to embrace and willing to take on? Because that I feel like that's a lot for a young person to have to deal with constantly.
I think it was definitely unconscious at first. Like it was like something didn't realize that I was doing until honestly, like when I was much older and I could look back on times and be like, well, I felt the pressure to perform in this area because I wanted to be a good representation of the rest of my community. And once I started really thinking about it like that, I think that's when a lot of the harder conversations started to come up because people were more willing to ask me questions because I was more confident in the person that I was and how I was acting. And so people were more willing to just step out of their comfort zone and ask me questions about, how are you feeling in this moment, or how does this relate to you, or how does this work? And I think that was a really good segue into having a lot of tougher conversations and just really educating the people around me, especially because they don't see a lot of Black people. And since I was, in predominantly white areas, I was like really the poster child for, what it looks like outside of this area.
Did you ever have moments growing up playing softball where you kind of felt that, where it's like, okay, I'm the only black player, or I'm on a team where it's like, it's kind of, I'm the only one who looks like me or thinks like me, or any cultural differences or anything like that?
Yeah, actually, when I was younger, honestly, up until I got to college, I had never been on a team with more than two Black people. It was like me and one other person. When I was really young, and like 9 years old, 10 years old, and doing like 10U, it was just me and one other girl, and I felt like everything that happened to her like reflected off of me or our family. So like when they were late, it was like, okay, well, we're not all late, like, and I felt like I had the pressure of, okay, well, I have to be like the good version so people have like a good repertoire of like what Black people are like or what they feel like Black softball players would be like. And we were very much built different at the time because I was a very lanky young child. And so, I'm like hitting left-handed and using my speed, and she's using her power. And I'm like, okay, well, we have to do well, and we have to like, perform right and act right and talk right so that people like, don't think of us poorly. And so that was a lot growing up. And then getting to college, it was like the first time I had been on a team with more than one other Black person, and we had six people. And it was really cool because before I got to college, it was one, two, three, four, and six were all Black people. So I picked number five so I could be in the little line. And so that was like a huge cultural shift for me. And I learned so much in that first year. And I still like talk to all those people because I'm like, you guys were like my big sisters. I feel like I didn't see the world through that side of the spectrum because I'm like grew up in predominantly white areas, went to predominantly at high school, and even went to PWI for college. But they taught me so much about like, well, they might do that, but for us, this is more where we need to go in this direction. Or, you can't just wear your hair like that because that's just not like our style. And that's not how, it works. And I was like, oh, okay. Like I felt like I was completely transformed, and it was a really interesting growing season for my freshman year.
And it sounds like there might have been, not just obviously on the field, but off the field socially, a little bit of a pressure of being kind of that representation, as you mentioned, being that one black face or one of two. So did you feel that from a negative standpoint? Did it feel like heavy on you at times, just kind of walking through that?
I think it felt more heavy when things were going outside of softball, like more politically or socially. So they see me as me because they know like this is Sydney and she's acts like this, and they love that. And then when they saw things going on outside and the reaction that I had, they almost didn't put the two things together. Like, hey, that could be Sydney at any point. They're like, okay, well that's Sydney, and these are these other group of people. And so especially this past summer, my teammates were like reaching out because they were like, well, like, how do you feel about it? And I'm like, well, this could really be me at any point. And they're like, I never thought about it that way. And it's just a lot of learning and growing for us and then for other people as well. And then for most of my life, I didn't have like a Black coach either. So it felt like I really was the only one. And when I got to Radford, I did have a Black coach. So it kind of made me feel like, okay, so now you guys see her in this position, you see me in this position. And it kind of like blurred the line a little bit more for them.
Yeah. And now, of course, like you have all of that going on from a social standpoint, but you also have the added bonus, like so many other student athletes, of leaving home and having to get adjusted to that. Born in New Jersey, moved to Virginia as a kid, Georgia for high school, and then you go from Appling, Georgia, right outside of Augusta, down the road to Georgia Southern. Then the last 3 years you've been in Virginia, back in Virginia at Radford. So were any of these moves any kind of a culture shock just from moving around or just being around different people?
I would say the biggest one was going from Northern Virginia to Augusta, Georgia, because I learned so many different words that I did not know. It took me like years to start saying y'all because it just didn't feel right out of the mouth. But it was definitely a culture shock because people down here, they move a lot slower, but they also just see the world differently. And when I got back out, so when I went back to Radford, or up to Virginia, I realized like, wow, I was kind of stuck in those ways for a while because that's when I was like kind of the most moldable in my high school years and like really developing my own opinions on the world. So when I finally got out again, I was like, wow, this is a lot different than what I remembered, especially about Virginia. I'm like, this is a lot different than I remembered. But Augusta is definitely a very progressive area and it's changing constantly. And so to watch it have changed since I've been in middle school to now, out of college, it's pretty interesting. But I definitely think that was the hardest transition for me. I never wanted to leave Nova, but when I got to Augusta, I used to call it Disgusta because I didn't like it. And then I ended up absolutely loving it. And now I'm like, I want to stay forever. I never want to leave.
And that's fantastic that you really got to adjust to the new surroundings. Now, aside from softball, you're also heavily involved in another world that isn't often associated with Black people in general, Black women especially, and that's STEM. So, just to remind our viewers, okay, so you're not just taking science classes or studying lightly. A 4.0 in biology and chemistry as a double major. What made biochemistry and the sciences such an interest to you? What really caught your attention?
Both my parents being from the STEM background, my mom being a nurse and my dad majoring in engineering, I already was kind of in the puzzly, sciencey brain set. And then I just clung to animals for some random reason. I was like, I want to be a vet. I want to be a vet. I want to be a vet. And most people say that when they're 5 and grow out of it. But I was consistent, and my parents put me in every position they could. I did horseback riding. I always had animals growing up. And so I was like, I just want to be a vet. I just want to be a vet. And I just kept going through. And there were some times where I wavered and I was like, maybe I'll be a marine biologist. And I was like, no, I like the mobility of being a vet. Then there was a time when I was like, maybe I should be an engineer. But I really felt like I love people, but I love puzzles and I love science. So that was like the perfect intersect. It was being a vet because you get the people interaction and talking to them, which I absolutely love to do. But then because the animal doesn't speak, you're trying to put together all these clues and kind of it's just like a big puzzle to find a diagnosis. And so I put those two together and I just stuck on that path. And I think that that's why I ended up choosing veterinary medicine.
But it's so interesting that you have both your parents there with that type of background to really help you through it and figure out and show you an example of what you can go and do. But was there anyone else who had an impact on you, or anyone else who kind of empowered you to really not just have an interest in that career path, but really kick off and go on to be lined up to be in veterinary school as you have coming up?
Um, I definitely think when I started working for the vet, that was a big thing to tell me that I really like this. I really like it. I can do it. I went to a Tuskegee vet camp and to see people not only of our like representation wise, but people that have done it and now they're coming back and teaching. And I was like, okay, this is really achievable. And I think that was always my goal was I never wanted to put limitations on myself, but definitely put expectations or have a standard. But I could always go up from there. And that was, I think, what really drove me to just keep on going. And so I think when I saw that, I was like, this is achievable. I can do it. It's just going to have to take some hard work and, a little elbow grease, but we're going to make it there. And I think that was one thing that kind of turned the corner and made me decide veterinary medicine for sure.
And so now that you're in the middle of it, what does it mean to you to be a Black woman in STEM?
It means a lot. Like it's so cool. Our graduating class at Radford for chemistry was 21 people, and I was the only Black person in that. I was one of two. So again, one of two Black people in that. And it was just incredible to see just how much we could do, and to know that one day they're going to call me doctor and I'll be the doctor. I'll be the one that people want to come and see. And that is just like incredible. And just watching how other people react to that. Yesterday, I was talking to our little FCA family, and the little girls were like, "So you're going to be Doc McStuffin, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to be Doc McStuffins, exactly that, just real animals." And they were like, "That is so cool." And I was like, "It is really cool. I'm going to be Doc McStuffins, but just real animals. Like, it's all the same." And so I just think it's cool to see, representation at a young age, and then them being able to make that connection. Like, that's basically what you're going to be. And I'm like, yeah, that's basically what I'm going to be.
You got the chance to present some research at Radford's Winter Creative Activities and Research Days. You have some new research coming soon, I believe. What was it that you got to present at Radford?
Before, I did an analytical class and we presented on soil. So we got different samples of soil and we crushed it up and tried to quantify the metals in it using different tests and chromatography. But recently, I started doing last year. I've done this for a year now, which is doesn't sound very fun, but it actually is. We do aquatic research. So the little bugs in the water that you probably don't want to see and you won't see, they're microscopic. I pick them out and sort them into different class and genus and species. And then we crush those up and we quantify the metal to kind of see where is the metal falling within the water, which is kind of interesting, but also kind of not. And currently, the research that I just finished up is I did some organic chemistry research. My organic chemistry professor from a couple years ago got in contact with me, and she was like, "I know that you would be really good at this job, but you might not enjoy it." But it ended up being great. So I ended up working on 4 chapters of a textbook, which will come out in 2022. And I did gas chromatography, mass spectroscopy, infrared spectroscopy, and and NMR. So basically, what an like a MRI machine would be, but for little small chemicals. And basically, we make all these spectra, and from the spectra, you're able to tell what a chemical will do and how it's formed and all the structures of it, which is kind of interesting. So we're going to post that into our textbook.
And I mean, it's one thing to have published research, but another level to be in a textbook. I mean, that has to be pretty cool, right?
It's super cool. She like showed me where my name would be, and because she's working on the textbook now, and she's like, "So this is where your little picture will be, and then all your credentials underneath it." And I was like, "That's me, that's me." And my mom's like, "I want a copy." I was like, "Mom, you're never gonna open the book. You're never gonna open it. You're never gonna need it, but we'll get you a copy."
Well, do you get a copy of the textbook? Like, how does this go?
Yeah, so I signed away, all
Mm-hmm.
my research that I've done, and at the bottom it's like, okay, write your mailing address, we'll send you one of the first copies.
Nice.
And I'm like, oh, I can't wait to see it.
All right. So now then, looking to the next step for you after graduating, getting your undergrad, you're looking at veterinary school. So what was the process like, and are you ready?
Ready? I don't know. So you start applying like the year going into your senior year. So I started last summer, and there's a bunch of essays, and you got to get your letter of recommendations, and you have to have hours. And thankfully, I've been working at the vet I work at down here for the last 3 years. So I had plenty of hours, which was great. I also worked for a mixed animal vet. So I did some farm calls with a veterinarian, which was really cool because I got to see pigs and like goats and hold on to horses and x-ray horses out on the road, which was really fun. And so I had all those hours, accumulated, and I had to get my letters of recommendation from my doctors. And I ended up applying to 5 schools, and I applied to Michigan State because that's where my parents went, NC State because it's one of the best schools in the country, of course, University of Georgia because I wanted to come home anyway, LSU, and Auburn because I really wanted a football team. Being at Radford for the last 3 years, I didn't have a football
Yeah.
team, and I was like, I'm going to go somewhere that has a good football team. So I applied to all schools that had good football teams. In the week, it was a week in December, and random week, one of my vets that I worked for was like, "Well, so what's your backup plan?" And I was like, honestly, I haven't really thought about it. I'm not sure. So I spent the next like 3 days thinking about what am I going to do if I don't get in? What am I going to do? And then I came back in one day and we were checking our emails, me and my coworker, and I looked and I had an email from LSU saying check the portal, and LSU was like, "Hey, you're in, and you don't even have to do an interview." And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm in vet school. I can't believe it. Like no matter what, I'm going somewhere. So that was really exciting. And then come springtime, I got an email from Auburn, and I did an interview for them, and the interview went really well. So I was kind of feeling good. And then, so I got their acceptance, and then I got Georgia's acceptance, and then I got waitlisted at NC State. And by that time, when I got into Georgia, it was like all hands off. Like I was like, yep, that's where I'm going. Sign the wherever the dotted line I need to sign. Like Georgia is going to be it. So I was stoked to get into Georgia. My doctors from home went to Georgia, so they wrote me good letters of recommendation. But yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Not only applying to all the schools, but getting into the schools and then having your pick, as opposed to it being the other way around and just last minute, like, someone, you're going to take me, right?
Yeah. And they say, vet school is so hard to get into. It's harder than med school because there's so few of them. There's less than 30 in the country. So when I got into more than one, I was like, oh my gosh, I actually have a choice and I get to choose the school that I want. And Georgia, of course, was the school I wanted to go to.
Well, I certainly think that you are someone who should be seen as a role model for pretty much anyone, but especially for young Black women. Do you look at yourself as an inspiration and a role model?
I think now I have started to probably in the last month. I feel like a lot, and I told my mom this the other day, I was like, a lot of my undergrad career was just me doing as much as I could and just kind of putting your head down and like running through the field. And then the last month when everything started to get real and I realized things were really ending, it was like I like looked up and like looked back at all of my accomplishments and was like, I really did a lot. And like this is really impressive and really good. And that was of course when around that time was when I got in contact with this nonprofit organization down here, Vets of All Colors, and they were stoked to talk to me and kind of wanted to make me like somebody that can talk to other schools and talk to younger people and just show them that this really is possible to be in the STEM field and also be of color and just being a student athlete and just doing so much at once and wearing so many hats. And I was like, wow, I actually have done so much. And it really made me like kind of proud of myself because I was like, I did a lot, even though I didn't feel like I was doing a lot, or sometimes I felt like I was doing too much. But to be at the end and knowing like I really did a lot of stuff, and even my teammates say it all the time. They're like, "We are so like thankful to have you on our team. Like you're such a role model to me." And I felt like that was the biggest impact that I could ever have left. Having great records was awesome and having a great season, but the way that I impacted my teammates and the future Radford softballers, I'm just like that is more of a impact and more worth it to me than anything.
And for you, I mean, just looking at your two loves, softball and STEM, how important would you say is it to get more Black women involved in each?
I think it's wildly important because just look what we can do when we get in there. When we get the opportunity and we, know that it's capable and know that it's possible, we can do anything. We can do anything we set our minds to. And to know that, like, I did it, I did 2 degrees at once, also juggling softball. I'm like, we can do anything we put our mind to, especially if we just know that other people are doing it. I think that makes a huge difference for people. It's just knowing that you're not alone in it. And that's kind of something that I've been trying to work on is promoting that and saying, you're not alone. I've done it. So and so has done it, and we can, really get through this. And even on our team, just it was a different relationship between me and my Black teammate versus me and everybody else. And I loved everybody equally. But for us too, we were like, hey, we're in this together. At the end of the day, like we're both doing this or putting in this effort, and we want to make sure that we like just show ourselves and prove to ourselves, but prove to others that we are equally as valued and have the seat at the table just like everybody else.
Well, Sydney, I mean, you are a fantastic person to talk to. You have a great resume, obviously, behind you, but we're all looking forward to seeing what comes next for you. As we wrap up, we do like to highlight a charity, a group our guest is involved in. Is there any organization or group that you'd like to shout out tonight, Sydney?
Yes, I would like to shout out Vets of All Colors. It's based out of Augusta, and what they're trying to do is just promote the idea of colored people being in the veterinarian field in general. So, vet technicians, veterinarians, even vet assistants. And it's out of Augusta. They have different coloring books that you can purchase, and it's really cool. And I'm going to start eventually speaking for them, like I mentioned prior, and hopefully I get to speak at some pretty cool places. And I'm really excited about just sharing my story and my testimony of how I got here, and hopefully just inspiring the next generation to be even better.
And for anyone interested, how can they come across those coloring books?
You can go to Facebook and type in Vets of All Colors, and it will take you all to what they have.
All right, perfect. And then for me, I'd like to shout out the Black Play-by-Play Scholarship and Grant Fund. The fund is a scholarship opportunity for Black college students interested in learning the art of sports play-by-play, trying to do something like this, interviewing people, but also learning how to be professional play-by-play during games, possibly calling softball games for the Big South tournament, something like that in the future. Anyone who's really interested in learning the art and getting mentored and potentially having a scholarship as well, that is what that is for. So this has been a fantastic opportunity for me to get to speak to you, Sydney. I really appreciate your time. Sydney Fisher, great athlete, a better student, and I really do appreciate your time and the opportunity to talk to you again.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing, and I love this platform that we've got to use.
Well, thank you, Sydney, and thank you, viewers, for tuning in. This has been Cultural Conversations with the Big South, and we'll catch you next time.